Thanks for joining us once again on another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm Sessions podcast. This is episode 194. And over the last several years, we've enjoyed hosting this podcast and sharing a lot of insights, discoveries, and personal experiences with the hopes that they benefit you. But the reality is, we're bound to get a few things wrong. And even though the goal is not to get things wrong and to always share really great, perfect information, but part of the process of growing and learning and evolving is leaving some things behind and also confronting some of those things that you thought were once true, but you learn that they don't quite hold as much weight. And so this episode, we're covering a few things that we've kind of had to wrestle with and confront ourselves with and change our perspectives on over the years of cupping more coffees, roasting more batches, and just learning overall and pushing our personal boundaries and our skill sets. Well, let's get into this. Quickly approaching 200 episodes, which is so wild. Never in my life would I have thought that I would have a podcast 200 episodes deep. That just sounds so bizarre.
Same. That's pretty wild.
Yeah. And around something like coffee too, that's just so.
Yeah.
It's like, well, why?
It's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do think that back in the day when we were just talking about the idea of having a podcast in general, not even a coffee one, I think we always stuck to the guns that it's easy to start a podcast, but it's very challenging to keep one going.
Yep.
It's easy. It's like 200 episodes coming up, like on 200 episodes, that's a lot of content, a lot of talking.
Yep.
A lot of changing your mind.
That's true. That's true. That's actually, I was not thinking about that. This was not an intentional segue, but yeah, I think the challenge with having a podcast is, and being a content creator in general, is that you're supposed to put out information and your personal thoughts. And in today's world, I think we're not as open to changing your mind and changing your thoughts in society. But at the same time, we have like these platforms that we're constantly releasing stuff on.
Right.
And it'd almost be stupid to think that, for example, you could record a podcast for 4 years or whatever and assume that you haven't changed.
Right. For sure.
You know, your perspectives will change. I mean, in this context, your palates will change, your preferences will change. I mean, a lot of things change. Yeah. And so with that comes new endeavors, new discoveries, new information, I don't know, knowledge it's like one of the things, like the reason why this came to me, because I was like, man, like my mind has changed. And I'm like, it's pretty crazy that like some early episodes, I probably wouldn't necessarily like suggest the same things.
Right.
And that was for a time in a season. Yeah. And so that all being said, folks, for those of you who have been around for a few years, like I said, like thanks for hanging around for so long. But really, like, we've gotten some things wrong and we've gotten some things right. And some things I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, like that's time, like tested by time, and it's still valid. And some things I'm like, I don't know. I just probably look at those from a different perspective. So
totally. Both are good. I feel the same way about, how I edit photos.
Yeah.
Like I don't feel like I've ever fully been like, oh, my preference on colors in this era was my favorite. Yeah. So I was like, oh, I see how I change. I would change. Would I edit any of those the same way, or my preference on colors be the same way? Probably not.
Right.
Yeah.
100%.
Colors and flavor have a lot in common, I would say, so makes sense.
Very preferential base. So,
batchy.
All right. We're still pouring batchy 4 years later. Nothing has changed.
Right? That's so good. This is nice.
Man, it's too hot. It's piping. It's piping.
This has like a quote unquote luring flavor on it.
Talk about things change. Wow.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
I never thought I'd say so. Here's Reggie say that on the pod. Wow.
Mm-hmm. It does.
It's not.
It's not?
Mm-mm.
And let me define what I mean by that. I feel like a lot of coffees roasted on a luring, the way that the acidity is developed has a very distinct, and I'm not going to draw a comparison of like good and bad, has a very distinct difference, if that makes sense.
Yep. It's not always though. I mean, for this very reason.
Yeah.
That this isn't.
This is not.
This is not a luring. Yeah. So for that very reason, it's not like a rule of thumb. Mm-hmm. You can still get beautiful roasts out of, many different machines, but there's usually, especially with folks roasting significantly lighter, there's usually this taste that I think it's a little bit noticeable.
Texture.
Yeah, it's a little bit noticeable the lighter you go.
It's complex. It's bright, but in a very sweet way.
Yeah. I was expecting actually a little more from this coffee.
Really? Well, you've brewed it multiple times, I assume. I haven't. No?
You have.
I have?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. It's not what I was expecting, but this is our old Columbia Miller.
Oh.
Yeah.
This is our coffee.
Yeah. Kind of interesting. It doesn't taste like
That's
the way I remember it.
mind-blowing.
I don't know why, but it doesn't taste like what I remember it to be. This was the leftovers of like the last of it from that big order that.
Yeah. I mean, this is a live reaction. Like I thought that this was a prodigal coffee. And that's why I'm like, it's either like, it's some form of either a luring or I wasn't going to say IMF, but
But yeah, still pretty juicy.
This is absolutely incredible.
This is pretty juicy, bright.
Wow.
Yeah. It's,
how many days off roast is this?
Not much. I mean, probably like around 3 weeks.
So literally the last roast we did of it.
Yeah. So
wow.
all that leftover
Mind
stuff.
blown. This is great.
Yeah. I think it's tasted, I don't know, better maybe other times, but it's definitely coming through differently than what I remember it to.
Way different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
dude, that is wild. You've kind of rattled my bones 2 podcasts in a row.
yeah, as it cools, it actually starts to open up a little sweeter, so to speak, and but
there's more of a tropical essence on it.
Yeah.
Not tropical like something super crazy, but there's a slight mango-esque to it. Not like pineapple, not coconut, not that kind of tropical. But it has
I think it leans a little
peach,
more fruit than it is brown sugar, kind of like what we had before on it. So
no berry-esque to it, but that like very nice round fruit, like even like mandarin orange, like stuff like that.
Maybe like a blood orange.
Blood orange, yeah.
I don't know which one we're gonna tackle first, but so this podcast, I mean, as you guys have heard, like it's just stuff that we've changed our mind on, that we've learned from the process of just trying, experimenting, tasting. I mean, just researching, growing. The insane amount of more education there is now than there was 5 years ago on the internet, even 5 years ago. Like a lot of good stuff. And so I don't know, I guess I'll start with saying I think a year ago was like an iconic moment for me, where it was like a year and a half ago where I did that roaster defect kit with Lance and Scott. And the way they were talking about baked roasts, like a good roast, and then an underdeveloped roast, and just tasting those cups bowls side by side, and then hearing them talk about it, and just drawing the parallel of like, okay, this is what I'm tasting, and this is what these folks are mentioning as it being this is what they're how they're describing the flavor experience that I'm having. And that little difference of just listening and tasting was like a big like aha moment for me, where I was like, okay, like that's why some roasters will roast lighter. That's
Makes
why
sense.
that's what like I had a huge shift in perspective in terms of roast color and roast development and flavor experience of like coffee is a scale of acidity to bitterness. And when I thought about that, I was like, oh, interesting. That changes how I see things, because it's a balance of the two. And it's just the scale that's moving between, hey, if I want more sweetness, you can develop a coffee a little more. And I enjoy sweet coffee. I do not like drinking lemon juice.
Yeah.
But when the coffee is sweeter and you're trying to push that out of the coffee by most of the time like developing it a little bit more, you all of a sudden start introducing bitterness. And so I was like, oh no, I do like sweetness, but I didn't like the bitterness in my cup. But I was like, this is just inherent. This is just what you get.
Yeah.
And I think over time I started realizing, okay, so there's actually a way to move that scale over and to kind of dial down on bitterness and try to maintain as much the sweeter, more nicer flavor experiences before getting into just straight up lemon juice.
Right.
And nothing against people who like something like that, but yeah, that's where like my gears started really turning, and I'm like, interesting. Like there's something here that I just I need to dive into a little bit. And I think one last thing, I think like, for example, last week's batchy on the podcast, September's Geisha Natural, where that coffee's roasted pretty light, but that's like a good representation of, you know, you've taken out some of the bitterness aspects in the roast, but the coffee itself, and probably because it's a really nice high quality coffee, and that's another thing we'll touch up on. Yeah, green is a huge aspect here, but it still had some sweetness, and it wasn't just lemon juice.
100%. And one, touching back with what you said about green and sourcing good green in order to roast it to a level that you prefer. Like if you're leaning on roasting light, then you better be sourcing coffees that accentuate the beauty of the coffee when it's roasted light, right? And that's also something that maybe I didn't fully change my mind, but got a deeper grasp and understanding in how important it is to source a coffee that reflects the way you want to roast. And I've read enough, posts and Reddit forums and barista forums that there's sometimes a belief that you could roast in a way that will make the green coffee better. And that's one thing I've gradually learned to understand is you can't make green coffee better. If green coffee is X, and of course there is subjectivity, because if you think about it, when someone is measuring green coffee on the scale of 0 to 100, the classic 85 is considered modern day specialty. If you're still using that scale, then someone had to roast it, and their capability of roasting it is going to reflect part of the grading of the 80 to 100, right?
Correct.
Like Scott used to always tell us, you can't taste past the roast. There's no such thing, really. Roast is going to impact the way you understand the coffee and how the green coffee is presented. But it's a little tangent. But I think it's worth mentioning is the fact that I think we've grown to also understand that how well you source also reflects how well you roast. So those two go in tandem. And some of the things that also with that idea of developing, like you were talking about, going from, acidity to bitterness. Yes, 100%. There is, everything's attached. And that's something I feel like I've had a comprehension of, but I haven't had the full experience or knowledge in the way that you and I have developed in the last 5 years of owning Mirror and roasting coffee a lot and cupping a lot of coffees and tasting way more coffees now than I've ever had in my life. That experience has helped me understand the fact that everything is on a scale. Everything is attached. So then how we roast and how we've developed coffees from day one to day now has changed drastically. And I approach the conversation and the experience of roasting from the perspective that when I was taught in the Specialty Coffee Association roasting courses, it was almost like there's these ideal parameters similar to when you're extracting espresso. You have to hit these numbers.
Yeah.
And I always thought like, if a coffee was, had less than 16% development time ratio, it's probably underdeveloped. When that's not the case. Right? And I think those numbers in my mind have changed. That, again, try to get rid of the preconceived idea of what a number dictates to what actually flavor dictates. Yes. Pair that with the quality of green that you're sourcing, the varietal, and understanding varietals more. Yeah. Those understandings will really change your mind about how you present a coffee, therefore how you roast.
Right. I think Roaster Cat, I believe, I could be butchering this. If I butcher this, I'll bear responsibility of that. But she said, I think she posted somewhere that said, hey, hot take, if you, an easy way, the easiest way to become better roasters is just to roast better coffee. And I totally agree. Like if you're like an okay roaster and somebody gives you like a 92 coffee.
Yeah.
Even if you turn that 92 coffee into an 87, because of your bad roasting, it's still better than the 86.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
And roasting has actually gotten easier for that in that sense. That was just like a comment on what you said earlier, but yeah, DTR also is in that vein. This is all kind of to get grouped together where a lot of the DTR stuff that we've changed our mind on kind of shifted how we've thought about it, and not like a 180 degree shift.
No.
We've always said that, hey, like DTRs plays a big role in your roast, and we still do think that, especially with some of the stuff that we've been looking into and measuring and matching DTR, where it's like, it's a big factor in overall how your taste gets presented is what happens from crack till the end of the roast.
Yeah.
What has changed though is like we're not aiming for anywhere near the numbers that we were aiming for before.
Yeah.
And we're okay with that. And it's still tasting. I mean, now better
than ever.
Yeah, better than ever.
Totally. Yeah.
And so that's definitely been changed. Like this coffee, actually, I remember when you had that fluke roast.
Yeah.
That your computer shut off or whatever.
Folks need to know sometimes stuff like that happens.
Yeah, mid roast Cropster bugs out, or whatever it is.
I get the glooming
the beach ball,
the beach ball
on the
beach ball. You're like, oh no, how do you keep
mode.
roasting?
Yeah, panic mode. So that just you just dropping it just way earlier than we have, and I was like, interesting. Like 4 years ago, I probably wouldn't enjoy this. But this is probably one of my favorite roasts of it, even though it was an accident of it.
Dude, that's so embarrassing. It's like our fluke roast at the end. Was it our last sack of that coffee too?
I don't know.
It was pretty close. At the end of our inventory, I have a bad mess up, and it's like, holy crap. Yeah. This is yummy.
Yeah. So,
so embarrassing.
Yeah, but I mean, that's you live and you learn. So yeah, that's definitely been something. But moving on, I think also the other thing I wanted to mention. So number one, just some stuff around development and roasting coffees, and I guess the change in palate preferences and stuff like that, and just seeing things differently. But the second thing I think is realizing the impact of grinders and burrs and balancing that, gear in general, because I think brewers go into there, and balancing that with with roast as well.
Yeah.
As because we are roasters. So, and I'm going to preface this with saying it's not that I didn't think that grinders made a big difference.
No.
Or brewers made a big difference. I definitely did think that they do made a difference. But now I'm just realizing like, oh, they actually make a really massive difference, and even getting very nitpicky about like, different, burr geometry or different grinders paired with different brewers.
Yep.
All of that plays such a big role in your final cup. And okay, bear with me. I think sometimes when people are like, oh yeah, that brewer just, results in lighter bodied coffees or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know. I just say that brewer's just not brewing your coffee.
I agree.
Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
People who are like, oh man, like flat bottoms have this like big, they're sweeter. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe they're just over extracted, or, maybe that's, but anyways, that all being said, I'm just now realizing how small little minute things, like if you pair like a really great burr with a great grinder, with a great dripper, and you dial all those things into your specific coffee preference, you can actually create a very unique experience.
For sure.
And it's not just as simple as like, oh, we like just making a good cup of coffee.
Yeah.
It's actually like, oh no, you can actually tailor like something special. Like when you go to a restaurant and somebody, they make, like a weekly special with unique ingredients that are only seasonal and stuff like this. And they're putting all these things together, that add up to a very unique experience. And that's what these things do. Where before, I think before my attention was like, can we just, I was a little bit more simple in my perspectives, where I was like, can we just brew coffee? Yeah. Like, and I still do things a little bit of that, because you don't want to get so carried away, but where you're like, oh, if I don't have a $500 grinder, I can't make a good coffee. Well, actually, like, I think some of the legendary people in the industry would just be like, give me a grinder from, I don't know, from like, give me the Hario hand mill. Yeah. And I'll be able to make a decent cup. Not the best. Yeah. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And there's definitely a scale of being so good and so smart at what you do. Like, the classic example of when people say, if you really, really know something, if you've grown to really understand something, you can explain it to a 5-year-old.
Right.
Like, there is wisdom in the understanding that when you really have become accustomed to something, when you're an expert at something, you can boil it down to simplicity. Yep. I think coffee can be like that. Like, there is these things and attributes of coffee where, like, I love how Nate always says, like Nate from Narrative always says, hey, if you just dump some water on it, it'll taste good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and I get the concept of that. Is that 100% true? No. Is there truth in that? Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Like, the reality is what you're doing is you're pouring water over ground coffee beans and it's producing a tasty beverage.
Right.
And I also think of like Mike Cannon. Like, he's like one of those legends that like you don't hear about. You met him when you were doing AeroPress. Like he has the craziest recipes. He's doing all these things. And then you're like, wait, that should not taste good, but that was legendary. Yeah. Like, so there is that concept to it. But I agree with grinders and with a lot of gear. I think a lot of my preconceived ideas was like, it was all a marketing gimmick. Like, oh, they're just saying that to say that because they needed to get more sales, or the review, like you're trying to sound very, very smart.
Yeah.
I think I had that initial, like, quote unquote judgment. Like, really? Are you serious? Like, is that the truth? Like, but obviously now the more we do what we're doing, the more we roast, the more, especially pair that with the way we've, the way our roasting has gradually shifted to lighter and lighter and lighter, but still properly developed. That has revealed the ideas and the truths behind when you use a certain grinder, it's going to affect how your coffee tastes.
Right.
Like, no matter how much you dial it in, it's going to affect how your coffee tastes. And that is important. And that the more we've experienced different like grinders from, your Trailmaster to my Ode to the EK to all of these different grinders, and seeing how that changes with our roast preference and our flavor preference, it's definitely been a eye-opening and like awakening moment where I'm like, oh, I actually want to get a better grinder because I want to lean into this preference. Yeah. I want to get better burrs because I want to lean into this crispy, this tea-like, this like lighter bodied, juicier flavor than before. I would be like, oh, I'll tighten up the ratio.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like, quote unquote, got more strength and more body, but it still doesn't taste the same as if you do the same ratio with a different grinder.
Right. And I think, and again, this is actually like a much more complex maybe conversation to have just a segment of it, because you still can adjust things in your brewing style.
Right.
And you can adjust things in the kind of coffees that you purchase to get stuff that you like, even with something not as complex or not as like expensive or, has all the bells and whistles. So you can adjust certain things, but it's coming at a cost oftentimes.
Yeah.
And dialing in all these little equipment and all the gear that you're using and all the parts, you can actually just say, hey, I don't want to sacrifice on something, and I'm looking for a particular experience. How can I line up all these parts to give me this kind of experience? Correct. Rather than having to push and pull all the time to figure it out. And you can, again, you can.
Yeah.
But they're just being aware that there's a whole different world, and why that's always been a hard thing for us. And I still think it's a hard thing for us because the way we QC coffees and what we drink and how we brew and how we, just dialing our batches.
Yeah.
Somebody may not have anywhere near that kind of gear, skill level. Gear and really skill level, to get those similar flavor experience. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Where, like, hey, what happens when only 10% of your customer base, people drinking our coffee, have an EK, but you're doing all your QC on an EK, not knowing that everybody buying your coffee is brewing it on an Ode.
Exactly.
Or on a Baratza Encore.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're tasting something that's very different than what you're tasting with your, low ultra high, uniformity burrs on an EK43S with Titus burr carrier and all the bells and whistles. Yeah. Like that's a hard thing for us to deal with, because our goal is like, how do we make as many people enjoy our coffee as possible?
Right.
Without saying, hey, you have to buy the best gears, the best burrs, the best brewer, all this stuff.
Yeah. And the other side of it is like, and this is a hot take. This might be a very, very hot take. Might be even like clickbait worthy hot take.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. No matter what the blade geometry of your blade grinder is, it's probably not going to make your geisha taste better.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like if you're using a blade grinder,
right.
No matter what kind of geometry it has on there, it 100%, doesn't make sense.
100%.
And the reason I bring that up is there is this return on investment when you're buying a very expensive coffee, but you don't have the proper tools to get the benefit of what you invested when you bought the coffee.
Right.
There is that return on investment. And that's why when people DM us or when people ask me in person, like, hey, what grinder would you buy? Mm-hmm. That question is really determined, well, what kind of coffee do you like?
Yep.
And there's been so much advancement in burr geometry, in, RPMage, and what coffees like, or what grinders do certain things. And, hand grinders are bulkier and bulkier by the day. Like there's been so much advancement in those areas that it's really, really hard to just say like, oh yeah, you should always get this grinder.
Yeah.
Or this geometry, burr geometry works the best.
Yep.
It's not as easy of an answer as possible. It's literally leaning into like, what is your preference? Why do you like this? And how can I support you with the right equipment recommendation to like it even more?
Yeah. Yeah. That all being said, I mean, I still use the Comandante, the X25, literally almost, it's been my primary grinder since I bought it. And I think I bought it at a discount at SCA.
Yeah.
And
that's sick.
It's like $150 or something.
And that's solid. Dude, that's so good. That's
like,
so good.
Like it's just like,
yeah.
Oh, well,
yeah.
Or you can buy something like very basic and I mean, it's not basic.
It's not.
It's a nice grinder.
Still a nice grinder.
But I mean, like, you don't have to spend $1,000 or whatever. So
for sure.
Speaking of brewers,
yeah,
I think one thing the way I used to brew was, how do you go as fine as possible?
Yes.
And then dial back.
Yeah.
And that's always kind of been my main thing for like, extracting the most and picking up your extraction yield or whatever. But I think I've caught myself over the last maybe 8 months actually going coarser.
Same.
And I don't know what that is about. And I know Lance also has recommended a few times to go coarser. And I was like, when I first heard them say that, I was like, oh, interesting. But then as I started just experimenting, I ended up actually adding a third pulse to my...
Yep.
I do a bloom. I used to do a bloom plus 2 pours, and then now I'm doing a bloom plus 3 pours.
Yep.
But I'm also going on my Comandante like 3, 4, 5 clicks coarser.
Yep.
And my brews have been tasting way more higher clarity, cleaner, just I don't know, a clearer, higher clarity. Did I say that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just I don't know. It's like just a very clean, juicy mouthfeel. So that's been something I'm like, oh, interesting. Okay, so I used to think go finer, and now I'm like, no, I don't know if I'd say that anymore.
Yeah, for me, it was similar in espresso. Like when dialing in espresso in a cafe, I would train and think that going to the extreme point of bitterness and then backing up a little was the best way. And I'm gradually, especially with brewing more at home, with taking more time to understand my coffee, I'm gradually leaning especially on the filter side, where I don't try to over extract and back up. I literally try to get to the point of the balance from coarseness. And that, you're right, because I've also changed in how I brew. The pulsating thing, like we've never quote unquote shared recipes, but I feel like we've come to the same conclusion I'd rather increase the amount of times I pulsate and with increasing flow rate and then decreasing the amount of bitterness we get in the cup, in the taste. I think that a lot of that, yes, we've quote unquote changed our mind or changed our approach in how we brew coffee. But the reality is it still comes down to the same thing. What are we doing? We're trying to increase flow rate and reduce channeling. Flow rate reduces channeling, and so that has gradually changed, but our understanding has deepened within that. Same thing with espresso. Remember the amount of times people would just glorify, and myself included, like glorify that, perfect stream in a naked portafilter and like, oh, there's no channeling. It kind of, got together within the 10 seconds and the stream is uniform, like whatever. But the reality is like ugly shots can taste really, really good. And that's just increased flow rate and you're decreasing channeling that way. So those ideas for me have like radically changed, and I'm basing things way more on flow rate now, whether it's espresso or filter, rather than just the whole concept of, reduce channeling because it's a flat bed, reduce channeling because I've reduced channeling because my bed is flat after I brewed it. And that was a metric, right? Reduce channeling because the stream went to a single stream in espresso. That's reduced channeling. But I think I see things way differently now according to flow rate rather than those kind of faux metrics.
And this could, as I'm thinking, this could just be just a flavor preference that's been changing. I mean, all of this is just all the things that we've talked about have been preferences that are changing. And as you're changing with your preferences, you're leaning towards different practices.
Yep.
And which makes sense. Yep. I mean, if your preferences change over time, if you've been drinking naturals all the time and you're like, I'm sick of these, and you move to washed, which a lot of people go through, you will start to change how you brew coffee, the kind of coffees you buy, what you're looking for in a flavor experience. Yeah. And that's normal. And I think a lot of that is also kind of the changes behind this. Yeah. It's more of a, hey, you're just adapting to what you're tasting rather than I don't know. Does that make, I don't know.
And it changes are also interesting thing to unpack when it comes to something that is so preferential, like you're saying.
Right. Yep.
Because it's not that we've went from something as drastic, like I love dark roast to I love light roast.
Yeah. Yep.
It's not that. It's more of this development of preference and development of skill and development of knowledge. All of those things have incorporated in what looks like drastic change to us now, when the reality, it's a progress of growth.
Yep.
And I think that is very common. That is very normal.
Yeah.
We should embrace that. We shouldn't be apologetic about that and 100%. Being like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I used to like this.
Yeah.
No, you like this and now you like this. Like, don't categorize it as that was evil and this is good. Like, you've just grown and developed and expanded and good for you. Like, let's embrace that. Yeah. So I think that's a very good assessment for everyone to have, whether you're a barista right now in a cafe and you've been managing this, or you were a barista, now you're managing a cafe, and your perspective on management has developed or changed, quote unquote. It's because you got smarter. Yeah. That's sick. Yeah. You know, or in our case, like, we just cupped so many coffees, have roasted so many roasts, have taken in so much advice that we've come up with our own conclusion. And today we're voicing this on this podcast. 200 episodes from now, at episode 400, probably say something that will be like, oh my gosh.
Right.
On that episode, we said this, like, this is even more complex than we ever imagined.
Yep. Well, folks, there you have it. Another episode. I think this was a fun one, and I hope this kind of maybe encourages you to kind of do some reflecting and think about, like, how have I grown? How have I kind of changed in my approaches to certain things and all that jazz. So anyways, thanks for watching another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm Sessions podcast. And as we always say, remember, reflect what's good.